Commanders fans, welcome back to Commanders HQ, your home for everything burgundy and gold. Let me start with this. Our team is pushing every single day to get better, to fine-tune this roster, and to put us in position to not only return to the NFC Championship game, but to push all the way to the Super Bowl. Every move matters, every signing matters, and every rumor that shakes the NFL landscape has an impact on Washington. Before we jump in, do me a favor, smash that like button right now. It helps us reach more Commanders fans and keeps this community growing as we gear up for one of the most exciting seasons in franchise history. And speaking of excitement, let's talk about the bombshell that Adam Schefter just dropped and why it has the entire NFC East buzzing. Commanders fans, you've probably already seen the reports. The Dallas Cowboys are actually listening to trade calls for all-pro edge rusher Micah Parsons. Let me repeat that. The Cowboys, of all teams, are taking calls about potentially moving on from one of the most dominant defenders in the entire NFL. Now let's be clear, no trade is imminent, but according to Adam Schefter, Dan Graziano, and Todd Archer of ESPN, several teams have reached out, and for the first time, Jerry Jones isn't shutting down the conversation. Think about that for a second. Parsons is only 25 years old, just entering his prime, and already one of the most feared pass rushers in the game. He's the kind of player who changes games single-handedly. For the Cowboys to even consider trading him tells you how messy the situation has gotten in Dallas. Parsons' contract should have been the easiest deal in the world to figure out. He's elite, he's young, he's a cornerstone. But Jerry Jones being Jerry Jones, things got complicated. Reports say Jones tried to negotiate directly with Parsons without going through his agent, a major misstep. Add in whispers about a back injury, rumors about Parsons being frustrated behind the scenes, and suddenly the relationship looks fractured. Now the Cowboys are backed into a corner. Do they pay him top dollar? Do they play hardball and risk alienating their superstar? Or do they shock the league and actually pull the trigger on a trade? Here's the bad news. Even if Parsons gets traded, he's not coming to Washington. Let's be real. Jerry Jones isn't about to hand over one of his franchise players to a division rival. It doesn't matter what Adam Peters offers. Parsons could be begging to reunite with Dan Quinn, his old defensive coordinator, and it still wouldn't happen. But here's the silver lining. The idea of Parsons leaving the NFC East altogether is a dream scenario for the Commanders. Think about how many times he's wrecked our offensive game plan. He's been a nightmare for us since the day he was drafted. The thought of not having to see him twice a year, that alone would be a win for Washington. And let's not overlook the impact on Dallas. If the Cowboys actually move on from Parsons, that's a massive hole in their defense. You don't replace a guy like that. Losing him would shake the foundation of their team just as Washington is getting stronger and deeper. So while we can't expect Parsons in burgundy and gold, the idea of him being out of Dallas, and maybe even out of the conference, is reason enough for Commanders fans to smile. Now, let's shift gears to the Commanders' latest roster moves. While the Cowboys are dealing with drama, Washington is quietly building depth and sharpening the roster. The team announced that RB Donovan Edwards and CB Darius Rush have been signed to the practice squad. These additions may not grab national headlines, but they matter. Edwards, just 22 years old, comes from a winning culture. He was part of Michigan's 2023 national championship team and even won MVP of the Big Ten championship in 2022. In his college career, Edwards rushed for 2,251 yards and 19 touchdowns while averaging an impressive 5.3 yards per carry. He also added nearly 800 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns through the air, showing he's a dual-threat weapon. He signed with the Jets as an undrafted free agent after the 2025 draft, but was cut in camp. Washington saw the value and scooped him up. He's versatile, explosive, and fits perfectly in an offense that wants to surround Jayden Daniels with weapons. Alongside Edwards, the Commanders brought in cornerback Darius Rush, adding another layer of depth to a secondary that already feels much improved. With Marshawn Lattimore, Mike Sainristil, Jonathan Jones, and rookie Trey Amos, the cornerback room is shaping up well, but keeping talent like Rush in the system is a smart play. Practice squad players often end up playing key roles when injuries strike, and both Edwards and Rush are the kind of young, hungry players who can contribute when their number is called. Here's the difference between Washington and Dallas. The Cowboys are in chaos with one of their best players potentially on the way out. Meanwhile, Washington is building stability, keeping the roster balanced, adding depth, and making sure there are no glaring weaknesses.
This is what smart teams do. It's not always about the headline trades or the splashy signings. Sometimes it's about stacking the roster with guys like Edwards and Rush, players who bring upside and can step in when you need them. And don't forget, Washington's front office under Adam Peters has shown a willingness to make bold moves. If the right opportunity comes, whether it's a trade deadline deal or a midseason signing, you can bet they'll be ready. On the surface, this feels strange, doesn't it? Last year, the Commanders became one of the league's best stories, going from a 4-win team in 2023 to storming all the way to the NFC Championship game. That type of turnaround usually screams youth movement. You'd expect the headlines to say Washington is building around one of the youngest cores in football. But the truth is the opposite. When final roster cuts came through this year, the Commanders' 53-man squad averaged 28.1 years old, the highest mark in the league and the highest since the early 2010s. Outside of Jaden Daniels and rookie corner Mike Sanderstrill, Washington's most impactful players are seasoned veterans, not rising youngsters. So how did this happen? Why does a franchise that looks built for the future actually lean on experience more than anyone? To understand this, you have to go back to the Ron Rivera years. Between 2020 and 2023, the Commanders had 4 consecutive draft classes that simply did not deliver. Only 6 players drafted during that span are even still on the roster. Think about that, 4 entire drafts and barely a half dozen players remain. And of those 6, just Sam Cosmi, currently sidelined with injury, and Quan Martin have carved out real starting roles. The rest? Busts or disappointments. Jamin Davis, the former first-round linebacker, is already out of the league. Fedarian Mathis, the drafted pick to anchor the defensive line, is gone as well. Jahan Dotson and Emmanuel Forbes Jr., 2 other high picks, are buried on depth charts elsewhere, fighting just to hang on to roster spots. Even tight end Cole Turner and defensive end Andre Jones Jr. didn't survive this year's cuts.
Rivera's inability to draft and develop long-term pieces left the Commanders with a massive talent gap. When Adam Peters took over as general manager before the 2024 season, he essentially inherited a black hole where young depth should have been. So, what did Peters do? He went bold. He flipped the usual script of rebuilding. Instead of slowly growing through the draft, he put the Commanders on the fast track by targeting veterans who could contribute immediately. In the span of one offseason, Washington brought in names like Zach Ertz, Bobby Wagner, and Austin Eckler, proven leaders with resumes that command respect. These aren't developmental prospects. They're guys you can plug in right away and count on to perform. It was Peters' way of saying, we're not going to waste Jaden Daniels' rookie window. We're going to win now. And in many ways, it worked. Washington didn't just get better, they became legitimate contenders, proving that experience still has value in a league obsessed with youth. But it also created this unusual identity, a young star quarterback surrounded by the oldest supporting cast in football. Normally, the blueprint for a contender looks something like this. Draft a young, talented core, develop them into playoff-caliber players, add veterans later to push the team into true championship contention. The Commanders are doing it backwards. Because Rivera's drafts left so little to build on, Peters had no choice but to fill holes with veterans first. He speed ran the rebuild, essentially skipping the growing pains phase. The result? A roster that can compete right now, but one that is also walking a tightrope when it comes to longevity. Let's be honest, Commanders fans, having the oldest roster in the NFL isn't inherently a bad thing. Veterans bring leadership, toughness, and a wealth of experience. That matters in high-pressure games, especially for a young quarterback like Jaden Daniels. But it does raise questions about the long-term picture. In 2 or 3 years, many of these veterans will be gone. The real test for Adam Peters will come when his draft classes start to define the roster. Can he build a young foundation to complement Daniels' prime years? Can he replace the veterans we're leaning on today with homegrown talent tomorrow? For now, Washington is in win-now mode. But eventually, the roster will need to get younger if this team wants to sustain success beyond the current window. It's not all doom and gloom for youth development. The Commanders do have a few promising young pieces. Jaden Daniels is already proving to be the face of the franchise. Mike Sanderstrill looks like a future star at cornerback. Luke McCaffrey and Ben Sinnott are intriguing offensive prospects who could grow into bigger roles. And defensively, rookies like Trey Amos and Tyler Owens have shown early flashes. So while the current roster is dominated by veterans, there are seeds of a younger core being planted. It's just going to take a couple of years to see them fully blossom. Here's the bottom line, Commanders fans. This roster may be old, but it's also tough, battle-tested, and hungry. Sometimes the youngest teams collapse under pressure. Veterans know how to weather storms. They know how to win ugly games in December. And if this is what it takes to maximize Jayden Daniels' early years, then so be it. The backwards rebuild may not look conventional, but if it brings Washington back to the Super Bowl for the first time since the early 90s, nobody is going to complain about average age. So Commanders fans, here's where we stand. The Cowboys might actually move on from Micah Parsons, and while he's not coming to Washington, the idea of him leaving Dallas should have every Commanders fan grinning ear to ear. Meanwhile, Washington is quietly strengthening its foundation, adding Donovan Edwards and Darius Rush to the practice squad, making sure this roster is as deep and competitive as possible. This is the difference between a team that's chasing headlines and a team that's chasing wins. Washington is locked in. Now, I want to hear from you. How would you feel if Micah Parsons actually got traded out of Dallas? And what do you think about the Commanders' practice squad additions? Could Donovan Edwards end up being a sneaky impact player down the line? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I love reading what you all have to say. And before you go, don't forget, hit that like button, subscribe to Commanders HQ, and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update as we get ready for this season. The Commanders are focused, they're building, and while Dallas deals with drama, Washington is setting the stage for something special. Burgundy and Gold family, this is our moment. Let's enjoy the ride.